In the last couple of days, a very interesting constitutional debate has ensued, and it centers around the Attorney General and the Auditor General over the COVID-19 audit that the Auditor General had put together, published it, and of course, sent a copy to Parliament as he should. For the very first time, at least since I became aware of our democratic practice, we have an Attorney General who then decides on the back of that publication to write an opinion, advice, he calls it, to the Auditor General to unpublish a published audit, which is, we call it unprecedented, and no wonder it started a wave of controversy. This is Godfrey Yeboahdame's position on the matter. He says the publication of that particular report was premature and unconstitutional, and that the Auditor General should simply take it to Parliament for a debate. And there was nothing in the Constitution that gave him that power to publish it when the proper forum for the consideration of this particular report is Parliament. That has generated some reaction, and the Public Accounts Committee has been responding to it. The chairman, who will be joining us for a conversation tonight, disagreed with that, right? And then makes the point, and James Klucha-Veji makes the point that the law that the Attorney General was citing actually empowers the Auditor General to do exactly what he's done. And the reference is around Article 1875, which mandates the Auditor General to submit to Parliament and government the audited accounts of this Republic. Now, until the Attorney General amends Section 23, which is an issue currently, the Audit Service Act, the Auditor General's action remains constitutional, which is the position of the Public Accounts Committee chairman on the matter. Well, other civil society players have also joined this particular debate because of its unprecedented nature. I mean, my guests will join me. I haven't seen before an Attorney General render an advice to the Auditor General on how he believes he should be going about his duties. And that is why you can imagine this has generated so much controversy. Occupy Ghana also got into this argument, making the point clearly to the Attorney General that he was wrong in rendering that particular advice at this particular time. And so they put forth their position on the matter, making the point that the Attorney General's position is unconstitutional, and that the Constitution does not restrict publishing reports. And their point is that if you read a constitutional provision in question, nowhere in there does it explicitly forbid the Auditor General from publishing his report online. And the CDD also issued his own position on this matter, but they went a bit further, right? They make the point about what they believe to be in the Akufo-Addo's penchant to continuously launch an assault, they believe, on the office of the Auditor General. And I guess this is coming on the back of what happened to Daniel Domelevo, who, of course, was asked to proceed on leave and came back and then retired, right? And CDD believes that is, what is happening right now with the advice seem to bring back memories of the treatment of Daniel Domelevo. The Auditor General has been quiet on this. I'll tell you what he's done instead, or not done, on the back of all the controversy. Tonight, on the back of the CDD position that I've just brought you, the Attorney General has come out fighting, insisting that his decision to render that opinion and advise his colleague Auditor General is in line with law, and he has done nothing wrong, and he has no intention of withdrawing that advice or withdrawing the advice to the Auditor General to unpublish that report. In fact, he insists that the CDD is wrong and he is right. And because the Auditor General comes under the purview of the Audit Service, and as such, the Attorney General remains the chief legal advisor to the office of the Auditor General as well. It's a very interesting constitutional argument happening. But forget about the constitutional argument. It's really about the work of the Auditor General. Can the Auditor General, or can he not publish his reports when he's done, right? That is really at the heart of this. And if you go to the Auditor General work, and if you follow what he's done, it's always been a practice of the Auditor General's office to publish his report once it's done. I mean, and that is really at the core of this. But also remember that the subject, the issue that triggered this whole controversy was the Auditor General's COVID-19 audit, right? And the timing of the advice is then raising all these questions about it. It's also the issue about public accountability, but also transparency in doing the work of a public officer like the Auditor General. Is the argument being made that he cannot share his findings, the audit was doing on the people's behalf, he cannot share it with the entire public, only to a select group of MPs before that can happen? I mean, that is at the heart of this big conversation that we're about to have tonight. But what has the Auditor General done since this controversy started and since he received the advice from the Attorney General? He's done exactly nothing. Well, the Attorney General says it was illegal advice and I'm entitled to give him that advice. If it's an advice, he can heed that advice or he can reject the advice. If you check the Auditor General's website, it appears that he's chosen to disregard the Attorney General's advice. Because this is the website of you may not see it because, but I can show you, I can tell you, that report, the COVID-19 report, is the one you see there, report to the Audit of Government of COVID-19 expenditure for the period 2020 to 2022 June. That report is still on the Auditor General's website, in spite of that advice, regardless of the advice. So which means that the Auditor General himself has decided to ignore the advice that he's received from the Attorney General. Shouldn't that just close this matter? But civil society, Parliament believe it's more. They fear this may be interference and this may set the precedence going forward. And so let's discuss it. After the break, I'll bring my guests who will join me and then we'll get into the real matters and why this is an important point in a democratic dispensation as far as the work of the Auditor General is concerned, and accountability, transparency, dealing with corruption, the big issues at the heart of this whole debate. Stay with me. And thank you very much for joining us here on PM Express. And indeed, tonight, let's have a conversation that has been brewing over the last few days. Let's try and get to the bottom of this, because also of the precedents it sets when it comes to our democratic dispensation. Joining me right now is James Kluchi-Aveji. He's the chairman of the Public Accounts Committee. Also joining me is Alfred Tianyeboa. He's a Deputy Attorney General. We'll also be joined by Dr. Kojo Pumpuni Asante, the Director for Advocacy and Policy Engagement at the Center for Democratic Development. I want to start with the Deputy Attorney General, Mr. Tianyeboa, who joins us right now via phone. Dr. Tianyeboa, thanks for your time. Can you hear me? Hello, Mr. Tianyeboa. Mr. Tianyeboa, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. Thanks that you could join me. If you can clarify for me this issue with the advice that the Attorney General's, your office, sent to the Auditor General. I am on the Auditor General's website and I find published audit reports dating back all the way to 1993. I wonder why it's become necessary for the Attorney General to render this advice now, when it's obvious from the website of the Auditor General that this is a long-standing practice.
Yes, good evening. Yes, if you look at the letter that our office wrote and signed by the learned Attorney General, it is to the effect that if you look at the constitutional provision as against the publications made by the Auditor General on his website, it is a considered opinion of the Attorney General that practice is not constitutional, ought not to be continued. So it might well be that the Auditor General in the years past might have been publishing the accounts, but that does not detract from the fact that such a practice could be advised upon, taking into consideration the Audit Service Act and the Constitution.
So, as far as the Attorney General's office is concerned, if the Auditor General should unpublish, in effect, remove from its website all these reports that are there dating back to 1993.
Actually, let me put this in context. The Attorney General does not have the power to direct or control the Auditor General. So if any publication have been made, at best, what the Attorney General could do, and which we have done, is to offer an advice. And we know advice is not binding. Because if you look at Article 187 of the Constitution, you will get a situation where you look at the independence of the Auditor General. So what the Attorney General is seeking to do is not to direct or to control the Auditor General to unpublish, but only to advise, which we have done. That advice is not binding.
So as you put it, this is as the chief legal advisor to the government, the Attorney General's office is convinced and is of the legal opinion that the publications that are currently on the website of the Attorney General are unconstitutional.
That is the position of the Attorney General.
Okay. And if your advice is to be heeded, then the advice is that he should take down everything that is currently published there.
Exactly. If the advice is to be heeded, as you rightly put it, the Auditor General may choose to heed or not, but that's within the province of the Auditor General. We have offered the advice, and that's where it ends.
Okay. And what is the legal basis for this particular position that you offer, this opinion that you offer to him?
Yes, if you look at the opinion rendered by the learned Attorney General to the Auditor General, it has set out the constitutional basis for the conduct of audit into various activities of government machinery. And the Constitution also mandates the Auditor General to submit its report, its findings to Parliament. Parliament, under our Constitution, is supposed to debate and, if necessary, make referral or reference to specific committees for certain things to be acted upon. If you take the Audit Service Act also, there's a provision that says that the Auditor General should publish its report. Now, if you take only the Audit Service Act, you may be tempted to believe on the face of it that it matters not that the Auditor General has submitted his audit report to Parliament. It can go ahead and publish the findings or the report. But if you read purposively Article 186, 187 of the Constitution, vis-a-vis the Audit Service Act, rationally, we come to the conclusion that an attempt by an Auditor General to publish its audit findings before Parliament debates and make a referral will be an activity that's seeking to prejudice whatever Parliament may want to do. And the subject matter of the audit may also not be fairly treated in the circumstance. So these are the areas within which we've come to the conclusion that looking at the Constitution and the Audit Service Act, there is the need for such a report to be submitted to Parliament, but the Auditor General should not publish it until Parliament has acted on that report.
Mr. Chayuba, I've read the constitutional provisions that you just referred to, 187, 186. In fact, 187, it's clearer to the point. Nowhere in the Constitution does it explicitly forbid the Auditor General from publishing his reports.
Yes. If you take the Constitution by its words, on the face of it, you are tempted to read the conclusion if you've reached. But there will be instances where provisions of the Constitution, even though are explicit, the courts have read into the provisions in the Constitution to make it more reasonable. Now, if you look at a situation where an individual has been indicted by the Auditor General, rarely so, and that individual is given the opportunity to appear before Public Accounts Committee of Parliament, whether an individual or an entity, to explain his or her action. It goes, therefore, reasonably to say that the Auditor General's report must hold until Parliament debates that report, hears that person who has been audited, and thereafter a final decision is taken on that person. We've had instances where people go to the Public Accounts Committee, they offer explanations, and notwithstanding the fact that the Auditor General has made some specific findings against them, the committee says, no, we think that this explanation is reasonable.
Please stay with me. Let me bring in the chairman of the Public Accounts Committee. And the Public Accounts Committee is a committee in Parliament that directly deals with the Auditor General's report. In fact, you could actually argue that they have supervisory jurisdiction over the Auditor General. And the chairman joins us, Mr. James. Mr. James, so you've had the position of the Attorney General. He's explained that it is not a directive. It is an advice to the Auditor General. And in fact, if you check the Auditor General's website, as I just explained and showed, the Auditor General has chosen to disregard that advice because the report is still published there. So really, this is a storm in a teacup, or I think there is more to this than just dismissing it because the Auditor General hasn't heeded to the advice.
Thank you very much. Good evening to our cherished viewers and listeners. Evans, I think that I'm happy that the Auditor General has disregarded the advice from the Attorney General. I said it last week that this advice is a wrong advice. Therefore, the Auditor General should not heed to that advice. And I'm happy that the report is still at the website of the Auditor General. And I have a reason for that. The Deputy Attorney General, Mr. Chayuba, has explained, and I think that I am not a lawyer, and I'm not empowered or mandated to interpret the Constitution, but my layman's interpretation of the Constitution is that the Attorney General has got it wrong altogether. Let's go to the Constitution and see what the Constitution says. Article 187 established the Auditor General. That is 1871. 1872 gave the function to be performed by the Auditor General is to audit the public accounts of Ghana. And all public offices, including the courts, the universities, the central and local government, public corporation, public boards, all of them. The Auditor General is mandated by the Constitution to audit these offices. Now, when these offices are audited by the Auditor General, what is he supposed to do? He prepares his report. And the Constitution says that submit the report to Parliament. That is Article 1875. Submit the report to Parliament. And in your report, draw Parliament's attention to irregularities that you find during the course of your audits. And any other thing that, in your opinion, as the Auditor General, Parliament need to know, draw his attention to. That ends it. 1876 says that Parliament shall debate the reports. Now, when that debate will take place, it's not stated by the Constitution. You recall that in the past, we used to have Auditor General report in the arrears of 6 years, 7 years. So it means that it can take 6, 7, 8 years before the report will be debated. The officers who have commissioned some of those irregularities might have retired. Some might have died. So you want that report to remain and not to be known to the public until after 6, 7 years when the Parliament is about to debate that report. That gap in the Constitution is what is filled by the Audit Service Act. You know, my understanding of the Constitution is that it's a matter law. It is not that detailed. So for a specific item in the Constitution, there is a law that is passed by Parliament to give effect to the provisions in the Constitution. So the Audit Service Act, which is Act 584, was passed by Parliament to give effect to Article 187 of the Constitution. And in that act, because the Parliament is mindful of the gap in the Constitution that after the report has been submitted by the Auditor General to Parliament, and it can take more years or very longer time for the Parliament to debate, the public cannot be in the darkness without knowing the content of the report. So Section 23 of the Audit Service Act specifically says that the Auditor General shall publish his report as soon as the report, he has submitted a report to Mr. Speaker to be laid. The session did not even say that the report should be laid before he published his report. It says that as soon as the Auditor General submits his report to the Speaker to be laid, he must publish it. So if the Auditor General, after submitting the COVID-19 report to the Speaker, and went ahead and published it, what wrong has he committed? Why are we deciding to read the Constitution, leaving the Act? Meanwhile, the Act passed by Parliament is to give effect to the provisions of the Constitution. Now, the same Constitution, Article 187, also says that the Auditor General, in the performance of his function, shall not be subject to any control of any authority or person.
Yes, but this is an advice, so he chooses to heed that advice or not.
So the Auditor General should not take that advice. In fact, the Attorney General should come out boldly and say, I have erred. That's all. That will end the matter.
Okay. Stay with me, please, because there's more to this. I want to bring in CDD's Dr. Kojo Asante, who is also joining us via Zoom now. Dr. Asante, the CDD wrote an opinion on this as well, and you believe this is an interference in his work. But if Mr. Chianyebo's position, as explained, is anything to go by on PM Express tonight, it was a simple legal advice that the Auditor General had the right to heed or not. Can you realistically say that is an interference in the work of the Auditor General?
Well, I thank you, and good evening to your viewers. First of all, I would encourage people to actually read our statement very carefully, because I have read the Attorney General's response, and really does not deal with the substantive matters that we raised. That his advice to the Auditor General. I mean, a lot of the issues that have been raised or as a response to the statement is really periphery. Issues about whether the Attorney General a right to give advice. That's not the substance of our statement. The Auditor General, the Attorney General gave an advice giving an interpretation of the Constitution and therefore concluding that the Auditor General had erred and therefore he needed to withdraw his report. That's the substance of the matter. And I just caught a bit of Honorable Tuayabua's submission in respect of why it is important for this process, to be followed. And I think it's completely flawed. At least Honorable Aveji, has, at least I know he has a finance accounting background. I think we are probably forgetting that we are talking about an audit report. This is not, just any other report. It has a characteristics of an external audit that has been completed. Parliament's job is not
We may have lost the audio to him there because of the connection. Do we still have him? Okay, we're done. Okay, let me bring in, I think we got a gist of the point he was making there. I want to put that point. I mean, hopefully he will further develop it, but I catch the point that he's making there. Mr. Tuayabu, that point that Dr. Kojo Asante was making, this is an audit report we are talking about. And in an auditing practice, before the auditors conclude the report, they would have sent a query to the management for a response. And in the Auditor General's report, you will often find the management responses incorporated in the Auditor General's report. And then you see the Auditor General going on to make recommendations, having had the responses that he had received. So the concern you express and the issues of prejudice have been addressed by the very nature and practice of auditing, because the people accused or about whom adverse findings have made are given an opportunity to be heard before the report is concluded. So doesn't that deal with that issue? So by the time we see it publicly, just as this COVID-19 audit, I can point to many, many portions of that where Ghana Health Service, the Ministry of Health, all responded to the findings that were made.
Yes, it is true that during auditing, the auditees are given a hearing. If, for example, Joy FM, you engage a private auditor to audit your books, and the staff is asked questions, is given that kind of hearing to issues raised by the auditors. Definitely, when the report comes out, there's no other external body that is going to submit the report to for that staff to respond to those concerns. But if you take that of the Auditor General, there is constitutional provision under Article 187 that mandates the Auditor General to submit his report to Parliament. So Parliament has something to do with the report. And that's the reason why, in the wisdom of Parliament, the auditees who are indicted in one way or the other are given the opportunity to appear before them to answer certain things. And at times, after the answers, the Honorable Chairman knows that sometimes when these auditees appear before the committee, they offer the documentation, they offer the answers, and the committee is satisfied with the answers. Meaning, the Auditor General's work does not end with this report, but it ends with the hearing before Parliament or by Parliament. So in terms of the publishing it here before it goes to Parliament, that's where we have the issue. We have an issue. So we still insist and stand by our position that looking at the Constitution, Article 187, and the fact that Parliament has something to do with the report of the Auditor General, until and unless Parliament comes out with its decision on the Auditor General's report, that report ought not to be published by the Auditor General. That's our opinion.
And that is because fundamentally you believe if you do so, you're prejudicing the findings against individuals who may subsequently appear before Parliament and may then get an opportunity to be heard properly.
Exactly.
Okay, I mean, but if that is the case, Parliament is simply a representation of the people. But the same, so you are now looking at the spirit of the Constitution and why the Constitution, although it wasn't explicit, laid out this procedure. But Parliament, remember, the Constitution is our Constitution. It's a Constitution done by the people, and all the powers are done in the name of the people. So what is so egregious about publishing an audit report in which already people who have been accused have been given a hearing and getting the public to know about it, when Parliament is going to be acting on the people's behalf anyway?
Yes. If the Constitution wanted the general public to debate the findings of the Auditor General in this report before their representatives could also have a second bite, you could have done so expressly in the Constitution.
But by the same token, I asked you earlier, if the Constitution wanted to forbid the Auditor General from publishing it, it would have explicitly said so. In fact, there is a subordinate law in the Audit Service Act that gives express permission to the Auditor General to publish. So on all fours, the law doesn't appear to me that supports your conclusion.
Even, I'm happy that you raised this issue of the Constitution and an Act of Parliament. If the group norm, that's the Constitution, has not made express provision as to how the publication should either be made or not, then if you have a subordinate, if I put it that way, an Act of Parliament, given opportunity to the Audit Service to publish, that's where the issue is.
But
the Constitution overrides an Act of Parliament.
Yeah, but that only becomes relevant if that subordinate law is it's in contravention, or as you guys put it, to the extent that it is inconsistent with the Constitution. Then of course it's an issue. But are you saying that that law it's inconsistent with the Constitution, Article 187?
A careful reading of Article 187 vis-a-vis the provision in the Audit Service Act relating to the publication of the report of the Auditor General. It's our humble position that if the Auditor General to go by the provision under the Audit Service Act, it is acting unconstitutionally, because that would be against Article 187.
Let me ask you, the real big question, though, is about the spirit of the advice that your office rendered. And also, that spirit is within the context of the COVID-19 audit, which, in all fairness, raised serious questions about the conduct of your government in the way you handle the public purse and the funds you got. Isn't this, I mean, to put it bluntly, self-serving, an attempt by the Attorney General, who, by the way, is appointed by the President, to cause an Auditor General whose work has left the government with, pretty much in bad taste and in suffering the backlash, to unpublish a document that makes you feel uncomfortable?
Far from that, we believe in accountability. The Office of Attorney General is one of the main institutions that's mandated also in a way fight corruption in any form of embezzlement or stealing. If the COVID-19 audit report, any individual or group of individuals have acted in a way that is not right, they should be held accountable. So it's not any attempt at all to just cover up. Not at all. That's why this issue has been raised. Maybe it was raised at the time that this audit report has come, but it's about all reports from the Auditor General.
Mr. Choi, but I need to challenge that position you expressed a bit, because I look at the Auditor General's website. Before they publish the audit into the COVID-19 expenditure, they report that was there just before that publication was called the Report to the Auditor General on the Consolidated Statements of Foreign Exchange Receipts and Payments of Bank of Ghana for the year ended 31st December 2020. Why didn't you raise your issues and advise them on this? Why did you only go to the Auditor General with this advice? Only when they published this very damning report about the way your government expended public funds on COVID-19.
I don't know whether it's a damning report. I don't know if it's a damning report. You may have another report. People may appear before Public Accounts Committee, and that's something that we are seeking to cure. Because now there's a judgment that is damning. You have committed something wrongful. So that's what's running through the public mind. But people may appear before Parliament, give explanations, and that kind of perception may not be the true case. So this is the very reason why we think that there is no need for the Auditor General to publish its report on the website before Parliament as a bite.
But my question remains. Before that report was published, I can count more than a dozen other reports in the last 6 years of this administration. Mr. Yebo Adame, who is the Attorney General, has been a deputy and is now the substantive minister. Why haven't you found the need to render this opinion before? Why just when this publication has been put forward, then you found the need to do so?
This is the way law develops. In fact, it takes someone at a point in time to raise an issue. Then it becomes an avenue to develop the law. So the fact that since 1993, no issue has been raised does not mean that today someone has found necessary to raise that issue. It's a kind of course that we are all chatting. This issue, if it's resolved, if our position is what is supposed to be the case and it's resolved, tomorrow if there's any other report, to go to the same route. So it's not about people not having complained previously but now complaining. No. It's about development of the law and positions that we think should be the position at every point in time. And then we move on.
Many will put it to you simply that the government, through the Attorney General, are simply uncomfortable with the findings of this report, and that is why you have been jolted into this particular advice.
Let me repeat it and state that anyone who has done anything untoward with regard to the COVID fund will be dealt with in accordance with law.
Yeah, but must be.
Meantime, Parliament should have its bite.
Yes.
How long is it going to take?
Okay. Stay with
then
me,
we'll know how the whole thing is like, and then we move on. But the moment we start publishing, before Parliament has its bite, that's where the concern is. So it's not something, we don't say that we are uncomfortable with it. No. Definitely, if people have embezzled funds, I want to repeat, the laws of the Republic must deal with such individuals. That's different from our complaint about publishing the report prior to the hearing before Parliament.
Okay. Thankfully, Dr. Kojo Asante has joined me again because of the bad connection. He's joined us on phone. Doc, you were making a point before we lost you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Evans. And actually, the more I listen to Robert Chaiwa, I get really worried. You see, the public policy rationale that he's now pursuing is really, really dangerous. You see, the Constitution has made it very clear. If the Auditor General disallows and surcharges somebody, or even disallow and says that, you have done this wrongly, you are not entitled to do this, and therefore I'm going to surcharge you. The Constitution says that's where you go to the High Court to go and challenge those things. Now the Auditor General calls some of these things recovery, which we have taken issue with. All right? Because you are talking about an audit report. That's what I keep saying, done by the state professional external auditor. You go and look at every audit principle, every direction, everybody that is doing auditing around the world. When that audit is completed, where the management has been given, all the entities, the people that he's talking about who will be cited and so on,
they've been given an opportunity to comment. Their comments are contained in the audit report and it's final. That's the state auditor. You have an internal audit process as well. When that is done, that report is presented to Parliament because Parliament represents the people whose assets, whose taxpayers' money has been expended. They are being asked to now deliberate and hold the executive accountable for the findings that are contained in the audit report. When you say that the Parliament is going to have its bite and then conclude, what are you saying? Are you saying that they are now going to change whether or not somebody has been found to have, embezzled money? The Constitution says you go to the High Court to go and challenge that. So we are trying to completely change the logic of an audit process. And we can look across the world, even where an auditor is actually an officer of Parliament, like in the UK, process. When he's done his audit, it's final. And besides, anything that you are submitting or laying before Parliament, isn't it public already? So why are we trying to create this confusion? Because what we are proposing is that we are introducing a new element where an audit report that has been done by the external auditor is now going to be interrogated, and you are saying that, a new conclusion? That is not Parliament's job. Parliament's job is to deliberate on the findings, and either through the Government Assurances Committee, the Public Accounts Committee, make sure that the findings of the auditor are implemented to the T. Otherwise, you don't get additional money to go and spend. That is what happens in other jurisdictions. So that is where I find a real problem with the Auditor General's, the Attorney General's advice, that we are now trying to completely dislodge this accountability process by now introducing an element where you say Parliament is going to have its bite. I don't understand that. The deliberation is important so that you can enforce the findings of the Auditor General. So it shouldn't, you say people are being cited and so on. There are many reports that go to Parliament that's already, once you lay it, it's public. Does this stop the deliberative process of the High Court? Does it make anybody, even court cases, when you go to court and you put, you go and make a case, isn't that public even before the proceedings?
But the concern is that publication publicly and the discussions that ensues will prejudice, people's minds or be trial by media and the public convicting people even before they are heard properly.
When the Attorney General charges somebody and goes to lay charges at the court, that's completely prejudiced the discussion because it's public. Because it's a public space. The transparency is important for ensuring that you have accountability. If we go by that logic, then you go and do court cases in secret. Because once you go and lay a charge, you haven't concluded the case. Is that the case? I don't think so. There are many reports that go to Parliament. Time. You late. That's why it's public.
Okay.
Right. So I don't buy that argument at all.
Substantively, the Auditor General, as of tonight, still has all the publications on his website. In fact, General Iwa has clarified that as far as the advice is concerned, all the reports published there should all go if the Auditor General wants to heed that advice. But that report is still there. And so the Auditor General, we assume, is disregarding that advice. No issue there, is it not?
We have maintained the position that he should ignore that advice.
Which is what he's doing.
And the point that we are taking a substantive, issue with the logic. So I keep saying is the advice, the interpretation that the Attorney General is giving to 187, it's worrisome because it seeks to roll back many years of trying to get the Auditor General into this position where reports are produced periodically on time and it's made public, and it puts an obligation on Parliament to hold the executive accountable. That is important if we are going to continue to pursue our stability objectives.
Yeah.
What the Attorney General is suggesting, for me, is a complete rollback of what we have tried to achieve over the last 50 years.
Yeah. I mean, James Klucha-Veggie, you've stated that this is wrong, but I wonder, if you listen to the concerns, it's not only about the advice, but it's what it's signaling in terms of, putting subtle pressure on the Auditor General, et cetera, although it's simply an advice. What as a committee, have you discussed this, and are you going to do anything substantively or beyond asking the Auditor General to disregard the advice? Would you ask the Auditor General, the Attorney General, to call him to task on this matter? Hello, Mr. Veggie.
Of the report by the Auditor General does not affect the work that we do. So we don't think that the Auditor General should heed to the advice of the Attorney General. In fact, if the Attorney General is saying that the subsidiary legislation or the Act, at 584, has a provision which is in conflict with the Constitution, Article 187. He is the Attorney General. What is he doing to ensure that Section 23 of the Audit Service Act is amended? So that if they don't want the Auditor General to publish the report, as soon as he submits the report to Parliament, they should amend the law and remove that. But let me ask the Deputy Attorney General, if the report is submitted to Parliament, does he know that it has become a public document? Is he going to advise Ghanaians not to discuss the content of the report when the report is submitted to Parliament, or they should wait until the Public Accounts Committee deal with the report before the Ghanaian public can debate the content of the report? That's a question I want him to answer.
Is that report formally before you already?
Yeah, it's before us. It's already been laid. Now, we are not going to take it now. Does it mean that Ghanaians cannot debate the content of that report? Because according to him, it is only the Public Accounts Committee that can call the auditees and query them or ask them questions. Is he saying that Ghanaians should not debate the content of that report now that it's public, because it's before Parliament?
Let me put that to him. Mr. Chaiwa, yes. How do you respond to that? Because it's before Parliament, it's public, I can get it, I can discuss it.
As we speak now, the report is public because of publication by the Auditor General. You go to your website, you can download the report there. You can read it, make your comment. But if we were to go to Parliament as a journalist, procure a copy from Parliament, that's a different ball game. Here, the body that audit, per our understanding, has put together a report. And what that body is supposed to do is submit or lay that report before Parliament. That's what it's its job. As to how Parliament handles that report is within the province of Parliament.
Let me ask you, it's been at least a week since that advice, at least we saw it made public. You may have possibly sent it to him earlier. On this website, all the reports are there, including the COVID-19 audit. That is him telling you he's disregarded that advice you gave him. Your reaction?
As I stated earlier on, this is an advice. An advice is not binding on them. They may choose to ignore it. It's not broken any bone. But that's the opinion that we have rendered.
So as it is now, I mean, your advice, it's been rejected. You're okay with it?
Because it's within their right to do so.
Okay. And finally, Mr. Veggie mentions the point that you've stated on the show that the Audit Service Act provision that allows for publication is in conflict with the Constitution. You are the Attorney General's office. Will you initiate processes to amend it?
We'll be looking at it until the next step.
you look at it and take the necessary steps. Does that mean that you're looking at it to amend it?
You see, if you see a provision, you may have to look at all the other laws, look at the constitutional provision, and see how best it could be. Because if you look at that section, the other thing it cannot be published, but it should be published after Parliament. So there's a need for an amendment. You try to, but just be sure that it's until the constitutional provision. So as I say, we take the three steps. When the time comes, definitely you get to know it.
Okay. Mr. Dr. Kojo Asante, finally, in terms of advocacy, you leave it here, or you tend to take further action to bring this matter to finality, possibly through the courts?
General, that we would equally resist it with everything that we can to resist it, because the more we get into the challenges that we have gotten into, we have to work very hard to strengthen our accountability systems. This is not a welcome intervention. And if the Attorney General insists that he wants to go this way, then we will all work very hard, to resist it. So I guess we will agree to disagree.
But he's just said that the intention is look at amending the Public Audit Service Act that gives the access provision to publish.
Yeah, to facilitate the Attorney General's understanding of the law. And we...
Sorry? Okay.
Attorney General was you. Then we also have our say and our mobilization around it.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Aveji. Thank you very much, Mr. Chianriwa, for agreeing to talk to us on this matter. Enjoy the rest of your evening, people.